Hey everyone, it's Stephen Mueller, and I'm just continuing my little uh, sort of video series of answering your questions here, people that have written in and have asked me questions. So I'm doing my best to kind of catch up on some of the backlog of questions here. So I'd like to address something entirely different, which is the question by a woman by the name of Erica Vuitton. Please forgive me if I'm pronouncing your last name incorrectly. Let's just say Erica V from Dallas, Texas. And she writes in and she says, you've traveled pretty extensively. What are some of your favorite destinations in the world and why? That's a great question, Erica. Um, I've been very fortunate, very blessed to have been able to travel a lot, and I've been to some great places. I've been to Europe, I don't even know how many times, many times, particularly Germany, since my family's originally from over there, and I have many friends over there. At least I used to have many friends over there. And when my wife and I first met, I actually became engaged to her. I proposed to her over there in the Bavarian Alps, along the border between Germany and Austria, in Upper Bavaria, in beautiful alpine setting. It was just really wonderful, and I love that area. I can't describe it, but I feel very strongly about my love and my passion for that area. And even my wife, when I first took her there, she said, I imagine that this is the sort of place, this is kind of like what I picture heaven looking like. I mean, it was that beautiful and it was that nice, and so that's always got a really special place in our hearts and in my heart. Um, and then several years later, or almost 10 years later, when I became seriously ill, as did my wife, unfortunately, we both became ill with the same illness, and I began to fear that it might hamper my ability in the future to be able to travel. So all of the sort of places that I was hoping to one day go to, all of a sudden became a priority. It became there was a sense of urgency. Not only a priority, I mean, borderline almost uh, obsession with going to these places while I still could. So we traveled very extensively. One of the first places I went to after that, my wife and we went to Egypt. I had always had a passion for Egypt. I'm a longtime member of ARCI, the American Research Center in Egypt. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. I also wrote a book on the subject, The Pharaohs of Ancient Egypt, and I've always been fascinated with the history of ancient Egypt. So basically, make a long story short, we went to Cairo, we stayed in Giza, at the foot of the pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, the father, son, and the grandson. And on my first morning there, my welcome to Egypt, I was essentially abducted by several lunatics that sort of, it's a long story, but essentially abducted and taken on a sort of forced tour of the area, if you want to call it a tour. And it was terrifying, exhilarating, and pretty awesome, all at the same time. And I know that my wife always says to me, she goes, "Honey, you know what? You're sick. The fact that you find that exciting." And I said, "Hey, there's a very fine line between being adventurous, having some excitement, and with an element of sort of danger in it. As long as all that ends well, or whatever the expression is, as long as it ends well, there's no harm in it." So yeah, it was pretty exciting. I went to Saqqara, I went to Dashur, where I climbed the Red Pyramid of Snefru, and then we went to go see the Bent Pyramid, went to the nearby site of Abu Sir. I visited the mastaba of Ptah, who was a vizier to several pharaohs in the 4th dynasty, and truly amazing places, places I can't even describe in words, places that really need to be experienced to be fully understood, you know. Um, Also went to Memphis, the Midrahina Museum, went to downtown Cairo, and I went to Saqqara to see the step pyramid of King Djoser, Pharaoh Djoser, the first pyramid in existence. And then the following year, in 2013, my wife and I went to South America. I had never been to South America before, and I always had a burning desire to visit Peru for some reason. I was fascinated by the history of Peru, the history of the Inca civilization, and in particular, the city of Cusco and the surrounding Sacred Valley area. And I ended up doing a book on that subject also. We went there, and not just to see Machu Picchu and some of the world famous sites like that, but some of the off the beaten path sort of places were among the coolest, the most fascinating spots to visit. Um, you know, I literally climbed mountains there. Like for example at Ollantaytambo, went to go see Sacsayhuaman. All these great sites in and around Cusco and the Sacred Valley of the Incas, and I was really taken by the area. It was just amazing, and I loved that area. And then later that same year, I set off to China. I went to Beijing, went to see Tiananmen Square, walked through the entire Forbidden City, which is an amazing palace complex, the largest in the world, and to the Lama Temple in Beijing, and then, made some excursions outside of that area. I went to go see the Ming tombs, for example, and just a lot of amazing sites. The Temple of Heaven, for example, and that was really amazing. Oh, and of course, the Great Wall of China. I mean, who doesn't want to see the Great Wall of China? It's one of the most amazing architectural achievements in the history of humanity, really. And then the following year, or actually a year and a half later, 2015, I decided to knock out my last continent, the last continent I hadn't set foot on yet, which was Australia. And I had, at the time, a friend there who was wonderful, and I went there and I visited her in Brisbane, and spent a lot of time on the Gold Coast, which is just a beautiful area. I really have to say nothing but the best about Australia. The people are very friendly. Everyone was very nice, and more importantly, that was my sixth and presumably final continent to visit. The only one remaining is Antarctica. I do have friends that have been to Antarctica, but I don't plan to set foot there myself. Number one, because there's really nothing to see there except snow, and I can see that here. And also, just desolation, and furthermore, I don't like the cold, so I can do without that. So, 6 out of 7 isn't too bad. And, I got my bucket list out of the way. My wife was amazingly supportive of me wanting to complete my bucket list of travels, once I became ill, and she was very, very supportive and wonderful. And like I said, we shared a lot of really exciting, amazing times together, times that, are among some of the greatest times of my life. And following that, a couple of years later, I actually flirted with the idea of starting my own adventure travel company, which is a project that is still ongoing. I'm still working on it. I have not abandoned that idea. So there may be something one day called, Stephen Mueller Expeditions or something of that nature. I'm hoping. So stay tuned for that. And my wife, joked around with me, and she said, you're like that Jack Colton character, the Michael Douglas character in the films Romancing the Stone and Jewel of the Nile. And we had a bit of a laugh over that. But I do love adventure. God, I really love adventure. I mean, I hate doing things that are boring and mundane. And to me, one of the most exciting things you can possibly do. And for me, the way that I feel really most alive oftentimes is through travel. And you meet amazing people from the moment you sort of work your way through the airports and on board the flights, and of course when you get to your destination and you explore all these amazing places, you see different people, meet different people, you get to know different cultures, you immerse yourself in the cultures, the language, the history of these different areas, and it's an amazing experience that I would encourage everyone to have at least once in your lifetime, if you're at all able to. So anyway, hope that answers the question, and thanks for that, and I'll do my best to answer future questions as well. Thanks very much. Take care.